Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. When we thought of having this seminar, we realized that one of the reasons we should have this seminar is because navigating sales tax can be much more easier if we understand certain fundamental concepts. Sales tax is like a foreign language, you know. In the beginning, all the words sound like jargons, like people use the word nexus, people use the word resale, you will hear people using the word wayfare. So many things that, you know, initially it sounds so foreign to us. But once we start understanding this, like any foreign language, once we start understanding the grammar, the pronunciation and all of it, it becomes much more easier for us to navigate the foreign language. Similarly, with respect to sales tax, once we start understanding the fundamental concepts, not only do we, understand how to navigate sales tax, we also learn to think, how do we navigate the sales tax. So, what is sales tax? Sales tax, as we all know, is an indirect tax. In US, sales tax is imposed on the sale of tangible personal property, which is your goods, and certain enumerated services. One big misconception that people have is that sales tax is only levied on goods, but that's not the case because many states have widened their ambit to also include services in the levy of sales tax. So sales tax is an indirect tax that is imposed on sale of goods and certain services. One of the key differences between India GST and sales tax is that sales tax, the power to levy sales tax in US is with the state government. Unlike India GST, where there is a central, where the central government has given a model GST law, and many states have adopted that model GST law. In US, the autonomy to levy sales tax is with the state governments. Now, what does this mean? This means there are multiple states which have their own law, including their own right of taxation. So what is taxable in a particular state may not be taxable in another state. So let's take the example of services. Services may be taxed, certain services may be taxed in one state, but certain services may not be taxed in another state. So that is one difference. Now, they don't stop over there. They complicate it even further by giving power to even local governments to impose sales tax. So the rates of sales tax could vary substantially from one locality to another. What does this mean? In India, let's say you go to PVR theatre and buy caramel popcorn. The rate will be the same in PVR Annanagar and PVR Velachery. The rate will be the same in Tamil Nadu, it will be the same in Maharashtra. But in US, let's take the example of Illinois, where the local governments have the power to decide what is taxable and what is not taxable, and the rate could also be different. In Illinois, let's say Illinois says sale of caramel popcorn is not taxable. Chicago can say sale of caramel popcorn is taxable. So this creates a lot of complexity because you would have to be aware of the regulations at the local level also and not just at the state level. And like I said, the rates could vary from one pin code to another pin code. So this is one of the key reasons why sales tax is a little bit more complex in US compared to India. Now another difference between India GST and sales tax is that sales tax in US is levied on the ultimate consumption. So supply made along the chain is not subject to sales tax. What does this mean? Let's say a manufacturer sells to a wholesaler, wholesaler sells to the retailer, retailer sells to the customer. In India, the manufacturer would have levied GST. The GST would have been claimed as an input tax credit by the wholesaler. Wholesaler would have, again charged GST when he sells to the retailer. Retailer would have claimed that as a credit, and that's how the chain goes. But in US, when the sale happens along the chain, there is no sales tax that is levied. It is only on the final consumption, meaning from the retailer to the consumer, where a sales tax is levied. Now, how does the chain work? So when the wholesaler purchases it from the manufacturer, the wholesaler gives something called a resale exemption certificate, meaning he is going to resell it to someone else, and therefore with the certificate, the manufacturer would not levy sales tax. Similarly, the retailer will give another exemption certificate to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler will not levy sales tax. So it is only levied on the ultimate consumption of goods or services. Now in US, 45 states and the District of Columbia currently have a sales tax levy. Of course, the local governments also have a sales tax levy. There are certain local governments, there are certain states where there is no local sales tax. Like, for example, Connecticut, there is no local sales tax, there is only a state tax. There are certain states which do not have a sales tax levy. These are called the nomad states. If you see the states, the first letter of all the states, they are the nomad states. So New Hampshire, Oregon, Montana, Alaska, and Delaware do not have a statewide sales tax levy. But again, one important thing to note here is, let's take the example of Alaska. Though Alaska does not have a statewide sales tax, it still has local governments which have formed something called an Alaska Municipal Corporation, where the local governments levy sales tax. So even though the statewide sales tax may not be there, there may still be a local tax. Similarly, Delaware has something called a gross receipts tax, basically like a privilege tax of doing business in Delaware. So though they may not have sales tax, one would have to be wary of the local regulations that are there in even these nomad states. Overall, on an average, state tax and local tax put together can be roughly around 7.5%, which is a big cost if it is not collected properly. Now, what is subject to sales tax? Like I mentioned, sale of tangible personal property and certain enumerated services are subject to sales tax. What is tangible personal property? I think it's fairly simple to understand. It is anything that can be seen, touched, or felt, basically your physical goods. Again, the thumb rule over here is the tangible personal property is taxable unless there is a specific exemption that is given in a particular state. So always operate with the assumption that the tangible personal property may be taxable provided you don't find an exemption for that particular category in the respective state. So you will have to look at each state law to decide whether that particular goods is taxable or not. Initially, it was only physical goods that was caught under the ambit of sales tax. Later, the government wanted to widen its ambit, so they started, taxing utilities like your electricity, fuel, gas, and all of it into the definition of TPP. With the advent of the software industry, they also started levying sales tax on computer software. Now, almost all the states levy, sales tax on the sale of computer software. And we'll see the nuances of that in the later slides. After that, they realized that now tangible goods are also not being sold. Many goods are being sold digitally, let's say e-books or your music or other stuff, digital stuff. So they started levying sales tax even on digital goods. So your digital books, music, and all of it is also subject to sales tax in a lot of states. Now, with respect to services, in 3 states, services are taxable by default. So unless you find a specific exemption in that state, all services are actually taxable in that state. These states are Hawaii, New Mexico, and South Dakota. But in all the other states, the thumb rule is unless that service is specifically enumerated, the service is actually not taxable. So you would have to go through the state's definition of the service, because states don't make it easier for us. Each state has its own definition. Let's say, for example, what is SaaS could be different in one state and could be different in another state. What is data processing could be different in one state and could be different in another states. So not only would you have to navigate whether that service is taxable in a particular state, but you would also have to see the definition of that particular service in that state. Now, tangible personal property does not include real property, which is your immovable property. So that is outside the ambit of sales tax. Tangible personal property also does not include certain property like your cash, your stock, bonds, and all of it. Now, the next important thing that we need to be aware of is which state has the right to tax. So this is commonly called the sourcing rules. Again, the sourcing rules may be different from state to state, but the common principles that are sort of defined, especially in something called the streamlined sales tax agreement, because some states came to an agreement that the definitions are different across, the principles are different across. So they realized that we need to have common definitions. So some states are part of this streamlined sales tax agreement, and in the streamlined sales tax agreement, they have listed down how do you source the sale. And this is to be read in a hierarchical order, meaning if the first rule does not apply, then you read the second rule does not apply, then you read the third rule, and so on. So you read it in an order. You can't jump to whichever rule you like. So the first rule is when a product is received by the purchaser at a business location of the seller, then the sale is sourced to that business location. What does this mean? Let's take an example of a customer who goes to an IKEA showroom and he purchases furniture from that IKEA showroom. The sale is sourced to the IKEA showroom because the property is purchased in the showroom itself. Now, if that's not the case, let's say I am sitting in California and I order furniture through the IKEA website and IKEA delivers it from, let's say, New Jersey to California, then the sale is sourced to California because I have received it in California. So if the first rule does not apply, then you go to the second rule. So you look at where it is received by the purchaser. The same example could be applied even for services. Let's say I attend a training session. Let's say, for example, you all have come here, right? Let's say we physically attend a training session in a particular place. Then the service is sourced to that particular location. But if, let's say, I attend a training class online, then the service will be sourced to wherever I am attending it from. So that's how you apply the first two rules. If you're not able to identify anything, meaning it's not clear, both the rules are not clear, then you source it to the business address of the purchaser. So whatever is the records that you have of the purchaser, you use that records to source it to that particular state. If that also is not possible, and there are certain cases where even that information you may not have. Let's say someone wants to subscribe to a particular software, right? In many cases, they don't ask for any information. You only give your credit card information, you pay for the subscription, and then you use the subscription. In those kind of cases, they say if you don't have any details, then you may have some payment history of the purchaser. So you look at, let's say, for example, the credit card information or any other payment information and use that location to source that particular sale. If even this is not possible, then you look at origin, basically where the tangible personal property was shipped from. So these are the sourcing rules and how you apply the sourcing rules, because this will determine which state has the right to tax. Now, for goods, it's very simple to apply the sourcing rules, but for services, it becomes challenging, especially let's take the example of SaaS industry, where you may have users across, right, where you take a subscription, but then the subscription is actually used by employees across various locations. Then where do you actually source the sale to? So there are certain challenges, but we would have to understand how do you apply the sourcing rules. Now, after applying the sourcing rules, we have to look at whether you have triggered a nexus in that particular state. Just because a sale is sourced to a particular location doesn't mean automatically nexus is triggered. What does this mean? Nexus means the right of a state to collect sales tax from the customer. What does nexus mean? Traditionally, nexus always meant physical location. Now, physical location could be in the form of an office, it could be in the form of having employees, it could be in the form of having a warehouse, it could be in multiple forms. Traditionally, physical nexus was what used to trigger, physical location was what used to trigger nexus. But there are some interesting developments, and there are certain interesting Supreme Court judgments in the concept of economic nexus, because states wanted to start taxing the sellers based on their economic nexus in a particular state. So the first decision was in 1967, where there was a mail order company by the name of National Bellas Hess. So what they used to do is, they used to send catalogs to their customers. They used to mail it and send the catalogs to the customers. Browsing the catalogs, the customers would place an order, okay? Now, this company did not have any office, it did not have any warehouse, it did not have any employee in that state. But it used to have customers who were ordering from that state. The Supreme Court in this case said sales tax cannot be levied because you don't have any physical presence, and physical nexus is required for you to trigger sales tax. Later, there was another Supreme Court judgment in the context of complete auto transit, where they laid down certain tests where they said only if these tests are satisfied, states could levy sales tax. The reason being, in US, the states do not have the power to regulate interstate commerce. The power is only with the central government. So they said states cannot, disrupt interstate commerce unless they meet these tests. And one of the tests that was laid out was a substantial nexus test. Meaning, unless there is a substantial nexus of the seller in a particular state, the state cannot levy sales tax on the seller. Quill is again very similar to National Belasses, where again the Supreme Court, agreed with the decision of National Belasses. Same mail order company selling goods through catalogs. Again, they said physical presence is mandatory for you to levy sales tax. Later came the decision which sort of paved the way for states to start introducing economic nexus thresholds into their state law. In Direct Marketing Association, there was a case where even if out-of-state sellers had to notify purchasers who were located in Colorado to pay use tax, and we'll touch upon what is use tax. So they said, if you are selling to a customer in Colorado, then you have to notify the customer to pay use tax. So when the judgment was, when the decision was going on, the Justice Kennedy pointed out that physical nexus is sort of obsolete in the current era. So he made a passing remark, but based on that, nearly 20 states started adopting economic nexus thresholds into their state law. What does economic nexus mean? So commonly, the states have, adopted a sales volume threshold and a number of transactions threshold. Either it could be sales of $100,000 or a transaction count of 200. This transaction count is slowly getting removed from the state law. Many people only have a sales volume threshold, but nearly 20 states, including South Dakota, introduced an economic nexus threshold, meaning if the seller crosses $100,000 in a particular state, then he triggered a nexus in that particular state. Then came the very famous Wayfair decision, which sort of changed the landscape of sales tax in US, because in this decision, the Supreme Court said economic nexus threshold is constitutionally valid because they have a safe harbor provision of $100,000 of sale, and therefore it is constitutionally valid. So after this decision, all of the states brought in an economic nexus threshold criteria. Now, what does this mean? Many India outbound, companies are set up in Delaware, and like we saw in the beginning, Delaware does not have a sales tax. But you have customers across. You don't have any other physical office. You don't have employees. You don't have anything. But you have customers across, US, and you have sales of, let's say, more than $100,000. You would trigger an economic nexus in that particular location. You would have to get registered, collect sales tax, and comply with the filings. So this is one of an important decision that sort of brought in this economic nexus criteria. Now, with respect to economic nexus, again, states don't make it easier for us. The definition of what is a sale is different across states. So some states say your taxable sales is what is counted for you to look at the $100,000 limit. Some states say you have to look at taxable sale plus exempt sale. So even if you're actually selling something which is exempt in that particular state, you may still have to register and do the necessary filings. You may not have to collect sales tax, but you may still have to register in that state and comply with the filings. Some states even include resale in the definition of sale. So like we discussed before, when you resell, you give an exemption certificate because of which you don't have to collect sales tax. But even if you resell, then also you have to get yourself registered in that particular state. So again, you will have to closely watch what is the definition of sale when you look at your economic nexus threshold criteria. Again, another thing which is different across states when you determine economic nexus is when do you see the limit? Some states say you look at your previous calendar year. Some states say you look at your current calendar year. Some states say look at the last 12 months. So that could also vary from state to state. And like I mentioned, some states still have a transaction threshold. So it's either a volume threshold or a transaction threshold, but many states have started removing the transaction threshold, including even South Dakota. Another important thing with respect to nexus is some of the states have something called an affiliate nexus or a click-through nexus. Now we discussed that, physical presence could be in the form of employees and all of that, right? Some states say you constitute physical presence if there is a group entity, your related party, that operates in that state and does a similar business like what you do. So they say that also constitutes a physical presence. Some states say, let's say you have an affiliate program wherein you're paying someone to run the affiliate links in his website. Then even that could constitute a physical presence. So physical presence can be triggered in multiple ways. Now we have physical presence and we have economic presence. Which do you think trumps? Let's say I have physical presence, but I have done only $1,000 of sale in a particular state. What do you think? Which would trump? Is it physical presence or economic presence? Sorry? Yeah, you're right. It is physical presence. So the minute you trigger physical presence in a particular state, your economic threshold does not matter. The sales volume does not matter. So if you have physical presence, you have to get yourself registered even though you have no sale in that particular state and still file sales tax returns. So that's about nexus. I think nexus is one of the most important things because many people think having an employee may not trigger nexus, even though you don't have, you make taxable sales, but ideally you're supposed to look at that state law, see if you have to get yourself registered and do the necessary compliances in a particular state. Now we'll look at a case study where I'll take you through different concepts and how nexus may probably apply. Let's say ABC Inc. provides SaaS service. ABC Inc. does not have any physical office outside Delaware. It undertakes certain activities and it wants to know whether nexus is triggered. So ABC Inc. has employees in California and these employees perform marketing function. Does nexus get triggered? Yeah? Yes. So here employees who perform marketing functions could trigger nexus. Some states say only employees who provide marketing function would trigger nexus. Meaning, let's say you have certain employees who provide administrative functions, then they may not trigger a nexus, but someone who does a direct marketing function would trigger nexus. ABC Inc. sends its employees to participate in trade shows in Illinois. Would that trigger nexus? Yeah, that also triggers nexus. But some states have a safe harbor rule. Like for example, they say, in Illinois, they say if the employees attend at least 2 trade shows, stay for at least 8 days, they have some materiality concept over there, they say only then nexus is triggered. YouTuber based in New York refers US users with his affiliate links. So they write these affiliate links in the description. I'm sure many of you would have noticed. Would that trigger nexus? Yes, that also triggers nexus. Some states have a volume threshold. They say using the affiliate links, the sales should have exceeded, let's say $10,000 or $15,000, then you trigger nexus. ABC Inc. has a physical server in Texas. Yes, that also triggers nexus because property in a state could also trigger nexus for you. ABC Inc. has listed its app on Apple Store, which has nationwide presence. That also could trigger nexus. Though the liability to collect sales tax may be on the Apple Store, because you are listed on Apple Store, which has nationwide presence and customers may be downloading from anywhere, if you cross the threshold, then that also triggers nexus. Yearly sales of ABC Inc. in South Dakota is $50,000. No, assuming they don't have any other physical presence, South Dakota requires you to cross $100,000, only then you trigger nexus. So therefore, you may not trigger nexus in South Dakota. So now that we saw nexus, let us look at certain exemptions that are there from sales and use tax. There are product-based exemptions like I discussed in the beginning. The common product-based exemptions are grocery, food. Again, you would have to look at the state-specific definition of what is grocery, what is food. Like Vivek said earlier, if it is frozen pizza, it may be different, but if it is actually, it's pizza that is made fresh, the taxability could be different. Prescription drugs, again, are exempt in most states. And then you also have clothing and various items that are exempt in some states. You also have entity-based exemptions, meaning if you sell to federal government or any government agency, then that transaction could be exempt. If you sell to non-profit organizations, that transaction could be exempt. Then there are certain use-based exemptions, the most important being resale exemption. So resale exemption, like I discussed before, the resale has to be in substantially the same form. Okay, so if it is in substantially the same form, then you get a resale exemption. Meaning when you sell the goods to the reseller, you don't have to collect sales tax. But for you to not levy sales tax, the most important documentation that you would have to have is a resale exemption certificate. So the buyer would have to give you a certificate stating that he is a reseller, based on which you accept it in good faith and not levy sales tax. If you don't have a resale exemption certificate, you will not qualify for the resale, because over here it is not substance over form, it is actually form over substance. So having a resale exemption certificate would be mandatory. Now when you have accepted it in good faith, you don't have to go and audit whether the reseller has actually sold the goods or not. Meaning, as long as you have looked at the certificate, it looks fine, then it's like a good faith acceptance, where you are not tomorrow charged for sales tax in case the reseller does not actually sell the goods or services. Resale can also be for services, but again you would have to look at the state specific definition of what is a resale of service. Certain states also give a manufacturing exemption. What does this mean? This means, let's say there are certain states where they say, if you buy raw materials which would be used in the manufacturing process and later you sell some tangible goods, then those raw materials that you purchase are exempt from sales tax. Certain states go a little bit higher in terms of the exemption, meaning they say even the manufacturing equipment that you use is also subject to a sales tax exemption. So even if you have certain plant and machinery that you use in the manufacturing process, that could also be exempt from sales tax. But again, you would have to give a certificate to the seller. There's also something called an occasional or casual sale, meaning you have done like a one-off sale, then that sale will be exempt. Let's say M2K, M2K does advisory services. M2K is scrapping its laptop. M2K need not collect sales tax because it is a one-off sale. Corporate reorganizations, sale of business, similar to our GST, where if you sell a business on a going concern basis, there is no GST levy. Similar to that, they have the concept of something called a bulk sale. So if you sell an undertaking, where the buyer can run the undertaking on its own, then that particular sale would also be exempt from sales tax. So these are certain exemptions, and if we have to look at state to state, what are the exemptions that are available. But what is important is to have the necessary certificates in place, because if you don't have the necessary certificates, then they could deny you the exemption. Now, what is use tax? Use tax is not a tax on using your phone or anything. I think many of you are aware of what is use tax, like the poll depicted. So, use tax is a compensatory tax, okay? What does this mean? It means if someone has not levied sales tax, then you may be subject to paying use tax. Meaning the purchaser has to pay the use tax. And it is not like the seller collects the sales tax and remits it to the government. The purchaser himself pays the use tax. Now, when is use tax applicable? Use tax is applicable on the privilege of ownership, possession, use, storage, or consumption in the state, to the extent a sales tax is imposed on similar property or service when purchased within the state. And what does this mean? Let's say I want to buy an iPhone, okay? In Pennsylvania, there is sales tax on purchase of iPhone. But then I realize in Delaware, there is no sales tax at all. So I travel to Delaware, purchase iPhone from Delaware without paying any sales tax, bring the iPhone back to Pennsylvania, okay? Now Pennsylvania, let's assume, has a 6% sales tax on iPhone. You have avoided the 6%. So Pennsylvania, if you had purchased in Pennsylvania, you would have paid 6% to the government. So the government says, no, because you are using that product in Pennsylvania, you have to pay that 6% tax on your own. So the purchaser has to pay the 6% tax to the Pennsylvania government. This is one example of use tax. Another example of use tax could be when there is a rate variance. Let's say there is a variance in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Then to the extent of the variance, you would have to pay use tax in the state of consumption. The third example could be in a case where, let's say you bought certain goods, you gave a resale exemption certificate saying you will actually resell the goods. But you don't resell the goods, you use it for your own consumption. Like we discussed earlier, sales tax should have been paid somewhere in the supply chain. Here, because you gave a resale exemption certificate, sales tax was not paid. And then you consume it and not sell it further. So in such a case, because you have consumed it, you become the ultimate consumer, and now you have to remit use tax to the government. So this is also one example where use tax could be applicable. Use tax could also be applicable when, let's say, you've bought goods, but you've sold it in a transaction which is exempt. Again, over there was no sales tax that was paid in the chain, therefore you would have to pay use tax. Another example where use tax is applicable is when you import. When you import, again, you don't pay any sales tax, right? So there may be use tax applicable on import as well. Now, what is important over here with respect to use tax, like I discussed, is it is a tax that is paid on your own. You are not collecting it from someone and paying it. So many people are not aware of something called use tax. So whenever you make any purchases or whenever someone has rendered any service to you and they are based out of US, then have a look at whether they have charged sales tax or not. Because if they have not charged sales tax, then you may be liable to pay a use tax. One other important example where use tax is applicable is in the context of, let's say, SaaS, right? When the seller sells the goods, provides SaaS services to the consumer, but it is actually used in multiple locations. So the employees use the SaaS product in multiple locations. The seller may not have actually collected tax, but you as a consumer, because you are using it in multiple states, would have to remit use tax. So that's again one example where use tax would be applicable. So it is important for you to not just know whether your sale is taxable or not, but also for you to understand whether the purchases or the consumption that you have done has already been subject to a sales tax levy, or do you have to render a use tax obligation. And for use tax, there is no threshold of $100,000. Even a single consumption, doesn't matter what is the threshold, would result in a use tax obligation. So let's take some examples of use tax and resale. Let's say a wholesale distributor XYZ sells laptops to retail stores located in California. XYZ purchases these laptops from manufacturers, does not pay sales tax because XYZ intends to resell it. Okay, so XYZ has the following questions. What are the obligations of XYZ at the time of purchase of the laptops from the manufacturers? Yeah, so XYZ would have to give an exemption certificate to the manufacturer so that the manufacturer does not charge sales tax. That's correct. What if XYZ uses certain laptops for own consumption? He has to pay use tax. What if XYZ resells the laptops to charitable organizations? Remit use tax. Okay. Of course, that is exempt, but you will still have to remit use tax because you are not doing a taxable retail after making the purchase. Suppose XYZ resells the laptop to a buyer who is a reseller. What should XYZ do? Collect exemption certificate. One important thing is, in certain states like New York, New Jersey, even for you to just collect an exemption certificate, you have to get yourself registered. So even to just collect a resale exemption certificate, you would have to register and do the necessary compliances. So that also would be an added compliance for you if you are present in these states. Should XYZ obtain registration in California? So California is where XYZ is doing its sales. Yes? Yes. So assuming that they have crossed one is if they have crossed the particular threshold. Second is if California government says for you to claim a resale exemption, you have to get yourself registered, then even for that case, you will have to get yourself registered. Now we will look at how certain services are taxable. Of course, the list of services vary from state to state, but this is just to give you a brief of how the state looks at taxing services. Now let's take the example of maintenance services. Okay, you have a lot of software maintenance agreements where technical support is provided or some sort of training support is provided. So when it is a mandatory maintenance agreement, and like I said earlier, computer software is treated as tangible personal property. So tangible personal property is taxable, right? So if it is a mandatory maintenance agreement in relation to a pre-written computer software and the cost of it is included in the sales price, then it is generally taxable because it is treated like a bundled sale and it is taxable. But if it is an optional maintenance agreement and the service is not the cost is separately mentioned in the invoice, unless that maintenance service is taxable in that particular state, there would not be a levy, meaning because it is optional and you've stated it separately, you don't have to charge sales tax on that particular service unless the service itself is taxable in that state. If the maintenance contracts includes delivery of certain upgrades or updates to the software, that is also treated as a sale of tangible personal property and subject to sales tax. With respect to information services where access is given to information, let's say for example like some sort of credit reporting or some sort of statistics that is given, some states say information service is subject to tax only if it is delivered in a tangible personal form, meaning it's delivered in a pen drive or a CD or some form. Some states say that doesn't matter what is the method of delivery, it is still subject to tax. Some states say it has to be access to information on a large scale basis, meaning it should be accessible to the general public. But if you provide this information service to a particular person and customize the information report to that particular person, then sales tax is not levied. Pure professional services are generally not subject to sales tax in most of the states. Professional services generally include something which is provided by a licensed professionals. So let's take the example of doctors or take the example of accountants or lawyers. Generally these kind of pure professional services are not subject to sales tax. Data processing service where data is given by your customer and you manipulate the data and give a report or something. Those kind of data processing services are taxable in some states. Data processing services, some states say only if you again provide in a tangible form like a pen drive or a CD, only then it is taxable, but some states say it doesn't matter what is the mode of delivery. Data processing service definition is very, very wide. For example, many businesses get caught under the limb of data processing service. Let's say, for example, revenue cycle management services. Many kinds of businesses may get caught under the definition of data processing services. Now, coming to software, again, the taxability of software could vary from state to state. If it is canned software, then in almost all the states, it is subject to tax. But if it is customized software, meaning you customize the software to the specific requirements of the customer, they say it is mostly treated as though it is a service. They don't treat it as though it is a sale of goods. They treat it as though it is a service. And in some states, it is not subject to tax. Some states still say only if you transfer it in physical form, it is taxable. But if it is an electronic delivery, and that's the case in most cases now, it is not subject to tax. But some states actually tax even electronic delivery of software. License agreements, unless the states say it falls under the definition of sale. So the definition of sale is generally transfer of ownership. And in some license agreements, you don't transfer the ownership and many rights are retained with the seller. So in certain states, even a license to use software is subject to sales tax, but in certain states, license agreements are not subject to sales tax. So here we have just, provided a table to show you how certain states differ in taxability. For example, in New York, customized software is not taxable, but everything else is taxable. In Connecticut, customized software is also taxable, but the rate is sort of lower than if you had sold your canned software. In California, customized software and electronic delivery is not taxable. In Illinois, customized software and license agreements are not taxable. So this is just to show you how states can vary in their taxability when it comes to a particular goods or service. Taxability of SaaS, again, very, very different from state to state. But many people, many states are trying to start taxing SaaS, and many states have started introducing SaaS within the definition of taxability. Washington, for example, treats it as a digital automated service and they tax it. Iowa says it is taxable, but if it is sold to a commercial enterprise, meaning B2B sales, then it is not taxable. But if it is B2C, then it is taxable. Pennsylvania says it is treated as though it is an electronic transfer of computer software and therefore it is subject to tax. Texas, that's why Texas definition of data processing service is so wide that SaaS also gets caught under the definition of data processing service. Missouri treats it as a non-taxable service. Wisconsin again treats it as a non-taxable service. So again, the taxability of SaaS could be different from state to state. Now, what are the challenges? Having said all of this, what are the challenges with respect to businesses operating in US? One of the main challenges is that the rate keeps changing. Like we discussed, there could be over 10,000 taxing jurisdictions, and keeping track of the rates itself is something that is very, very hard, and that's where automation softwares could be helpful for businesses. Tracking presence and movement of employees also could be different, because let's say one employee was originally in Washington and then he is moved to Pennsylvania, then you may have to get a registration in Pennsylvania just because the employee has moved his place of operation to Pennsylvania. So tracking the presence of employees also could be very, very difficult. Now states are also trying to tax, widen their tax ambit, because indirect tax is a great collection mechanism for the states. So many states have started adding many services into the definition of taxability. So you would have to keep looking at the definition and see whether you are you are supposed to collect sales tax or not. They don't have certain national registration system in some states. For example, in Louisiana, not only do you have to file a state return, you also have to file a local return. So take registration in the state, take registration in that particular city or county or whatever, and also file local returns in that state. So that again is one challenge that many businesses might face. Taxation of bundled service, again very complex. How do you look at it? How does it get taxed? Again is one of the challenges. So you would have to closely look at how is that state treating bundled service. Now, filing return, like I mentioned, let's say for example, you have physical presence, but you don't have any sale in that particular state. Though you don't have sale, you still have to file a return and do the necessary compliances. Or let's say you're doing exempt sale or resale, because that state's economic nexus threshold includes exempt sale and resale within the definition, you still have to do the necessary compliances. The consequence of non-compliance is again very, very high. Not only would you have to pay the sales tax out of your own pocket because you've not collected it from the customer, you also will be subject to an interest for delayed remittance of the sales tax. You may also be subject to penalty. So consequences of non-compliances could be very, very large. So these are certain challenges that businesses would face when they operate in US. So with that, I conclude the presentation. I hope I didn't confuse you even further, and I helped you to decode this foreign language of sales tax. Any questions?
Sorry, I repeat my question. So the question is related to the SaaS business. If a person, while coming to the platform, fills the information, name, address, phone number, and then PIN code of certain state, while actually using the services in some different state. So what does the law says? Like which state will be collecting the sales tax? The one in which he is physically present and consuming the services, and also, I mean, like the person can consume the services while revolving into multiple states, roaming around various states.
Yeah.
Or the state which the PIN number he has mentioned while subscribing to the SaaS platform and putting the PIN code, etc., etc. Or like, I don't know what is the criteria.
Yeah.
So that is what the question is.
Yeah. See, that is a good question, because you are looking at I mean, it may not even be a single user. There may be multiple users that are scattered across the state and across the country. So what they say is, you again look at the sourcing rules. What was the information that was available to you at the time of making the sale, right? If the information that was available to you, let's say the buyer tells you that my employees are using this SaaS license across these states. If you had that information, then you are supposed to pay sales tax if the service is taxable in all of those states. But let's say you don't have that information. That's why there is a compensatory tax called a use tax. So you would collect the sales tax based on the information that is given to you by the purchaser, but the purchaser would have to remit the use tax to the government. Now, there are certain states where there is something called a multiple point of use exemption certificate, okay? Where the buyer, because they understand that it is very difficult for the seller to determine where the license is actually going to be used, the states have given something called a multiple point of use exemption certificate. So the buyer gives this exemption certificate, meaning the seller does not have to collect sales tax. The buyer discharges the use tax based on the presence of the employees.
Understood. So, I mean, like in our case, which is a B2C platform, and it's a SaaS company, SaaS platform. So, I'm assuming that user will not give that certificate to us. And more importantly, my question is basically to understand, like, what does usually the law says? Like, the law is clear about the usage at which location the service is being consumed, or the PIN code or whatever address the user is mentioning while signing up the platform. What is the law?
I think as a seller, you will only be available, I mean, you will only have limited information. You would not know where is the user actually consuming it, right? You would only have information that is given to you at the time of sale. So if the information that is given to you at the time of sale is a particular state, then you will discharge sales tax for that state if it is taxable. But if the user moves from that state to some other state, then user is liable to pay use tax and not the seller.
Okay.